This program is brought to you by Pussy Magnets.
Put a midge on your friend with a pussy magnet.
Welcome, my lovely lumps. Or should I say lovely labs? I'm so thrilled to have you here in the Labia Lounge. We're going to yarn about all things sexuality, womanhood, relationships, intimacy, holistic health, and everything in between. Your legs. Ooh, can't help myself. Anyway, we're going to have vag loads of real chats with real people about real shit. So buckle up, you're about to receive the sex ed that you never had and have a bloody good laugh while you're at it. Before we dive in, I'd like to respectfully acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm recording this, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. It's an absolute privilege to be living and creating dope podcast content in Naarm, and I pay respect to their elders past, present, and emerging. Now, if you're ready, let's flap and do this. Oh my God, is there such thing as too many vagina jokes in the one intro? Whatever, it's my podcast. I'm leaving it in.
Don't panic, you're not broken. Your sex education was a piece of shit. Get your flaps out and pull up a couch. It's the Labia Lounge.
Hey gang, just before we jump into this episode, I wanted to offer you an opportunity to access my new mini course for free before I start charging for it in future. It's for people with vulvas and it's quick to complete. It's all about demystifying the female body and pleasure anatomy and getting some basic fundamentals to understand your body better. It's called Pussy Pleasure Secrets, Your Roadmap to Bedroom Bliss. You can grab it on the freebies page of my website or in the show notes. It's a great little free resource to kind of dip your toe in or act as a bit of a taster for my work. So if you've ever been curious about this sort of thing and you just don't know where to start, or you want a really quick, easy, accessible, non-threatening way to get the ball rolling and start working on this stuff, this is a great place to start. Hey labial lovers, welcome back to part 2 with Eleanor Hadley, who is a specialist in the areas of the art of seduction. We just did a part 1 on this, which we focused pretty much just predominantly around embodied lap dance, which is like kind of a term that Eleanor coined, part of her body of work called the Art of Seduction. Definitely go back and listen to that one if you haven't, but this is a little follow-on from that because we couldn't squeeze it all in one episode, and I really wanted to chat about I guess the art of dirty talk and, you know, how to send a really great sext, or potentially take a fun nude. And this is like an area that's not like this isn't something I do a lot of actually. So I'm curious to hear your input, Eleanor, but welcome back. Let's just start there. Hello.
Hello. Pleasure to be back.
We've just recorded it in the one sitting, so it feels a little bit funny to be doing another intro halfway through our chat. Anyway, just a breaking down of the fourth wall there for everyone. Cool. So, to give a bit of like context around like my relationship with dirty talk, quote unquote, I used to just think it was like, you know, the standard like porn speak, like, oh yeah, just like, you know, fuck, I can't even do it if I'm pretending. Oh yeah, like, do you like that, you filthy little slut? Like, or I think of I don't know if you ever saw The Mighty Boosh. There's a scene where like the crack fox is like, I'm gonna make you wear a little dress and hurt you, boy. And it sort of makes me think of that sometimes. But dirty talk for me was always like this particular way of speaking that felt very performative, felt very porn-like, felt very forced and kind of inauthentic to me. And maybe I just hadn't experienced like, you know, it being done in a way that felt sexy or authentic to me. Maybe I'd just been with people that had kind of watched so much porn that they were basically just copying that, and I was like, don't call me baby, don't say good girl, stop it. Like, I'm just very like, and that's what I thought dirty talk was. But I think I actually do engage in dirty talk more than I realize, because there's a lot of different ways you can incorporate it, and it doesn't have to be quote unquote like what you would think of as dirty. So I'd love to get your take on the different types of dirty talk. I know there's multiple different ways you can kind of experiment with this. So what do you got for us?
Yeah, definitely. I think that you really hit the nail on the head there. A lot of the assumption is that dirty talk is that like very, very typical porny sort of what you see in movies, stuff like that. But there's actually different types of dirty talk, or like talk throughout sex, whatever we want to call it. And so we've got descriptive, instructive, praise, degradation, and trust talk, as well as like sexting as well, which could be any of those kind of topics, I guess. And so descriptive is where this is probably what comes most natural. It's more like narrative in style, where you're describing what's happening, what you're about to do, what you're enjoying, seeing, tasting in the moment. And so this could be something like, you know, like, I love seeing how hard your cock is for me, or like, oh my God, your tits look incredible when you're bouncing on top of me, or like, I love how sweet your pussy tastes, or I'm going to do this to you, right? It's very descriptive. And so we're probably, a lot of us are probably already doing something like that. And that can just kind of really get you in the moment. Then you've got instructive, which is like telling someone what you want them to do, like how you like it, how you want to be touched, things like that. And so this is like classically like, you know, harder, faster, more, just like that. Don't stop. Like, I want you inside me, turn over. I want you from behind. So it's kind of like, it's asking or telling. Like asking for what you want, like, oh, yep, just like that, keep going, or telling them like, I want you to turn over, I want you to do this for me. And again, can be really, really hot, and you can sort of beef it up a little bit and make it as colorful as you like. Excuse me. You can cut that one out. Okay. Then you've got praise talk. And so this is like the good girls, right? This is the, like, oh my God, you suck my cock so well. You look incredible when you're doing this. You've got the most perfect XYZ. Look how gorgeous you are. Like, this is like, you know, you're doing this so well for me. Or, it's really
giving compliments
about,
and praise.
Exactly. It's about complimenting. It's almost like taking words of affirmation to the next level.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, it's like making like this positive feedback. And some people are like, oh, yay, gold star, pat on the head, I'm doing a good job. And it's just reinforcing to your partner, like, I like what you're doing. You're doing well. Sometimes it's even like, I'm proud of you. So it really depends on like what people like, and how comfortable they are with a compliment as well. Then we've got the degradation, which is something that I would say can only be done with explicit consent. You need to know that the person is like open to being degraded and into it. It's got to be an enthusiastic yes. I would never do this with a partner or accept someone doing this if we haven't had a discussion and we know they're into it. You know, some people can get really, really uncomfortable as well with praise, but it's not quite as damaging to say like, you know, you're doing a good job as it is like to say you're a little slut in between in the midst of sex when they're just like, oh, I don't feel comfortable being told that.
Oh, totally. It's definitely in the category of kink and BDSM. Yes. Like, there's definitely got to be discussions around that sort of thing. Whereas like giving a compliment is like, you know, it's a bit more chill. It's not, Exactly. And, you know, like chat about it. And I really think that this is such a great framework to say, what kind of talk do you like? You know, do you like me saying this kind of stuff? Do you like it when I say this? And so, if you are into degradation, then awesome. Have that
conversation if you like kind of degrading and like using that terminology in the moment because it kind of amps up the fieriness for you, then chat about that and see if your partner's open to it, but don't just say like look at you begging for it like out of nowhere, you know, or call them something that is derogatory without consent. And then one of my favorites is trust talk. So it's it's in the vein of dirty talk, but it's more like soft and sweet. It's akin to praise, but it's more like this beautiful romantic style. And I first experienced trust talk when I was with a partner, and we just had, you know, a bit of a sticky conversation. I was feeling a bit soft and a bit tender. And, you know, we made love and it was all very beautiful. And throughout he was like, I'm not going anywhere. I could stay here for hours. You're safe with me. And it was just this really beautiful experience to go like, oh, okay, yeah, I can soften. I can open up. I don't have to hold myself back here. And I trust this person. And that's, I think, such a gorgeous style. And, yeah, really, really nice, especially for like long-term lovers as well. Then you can take any of those, all of those, and put that into sexting. And with sexting, it's kind of like you're building up this arousal, and often you're describing what you wish you were doing or what you want them to be doing or what you are doing. So it can be quite descriptive in nature. You know, like I'm touching myself thinking about when we did this, or if you were here right now, I'd be doing this, or I'd love to hear you talk me through you doing XYZ to yourself right now. Things like that. That can be a really fun way as well to play around with the idea of dirty talk, but in your own sort of unique way.
Yeah, and I feel like that would be a lot less confronting if you aren't super comfortable or confident yet to do dirty talk in person or in the moment, or if it's maybe with a new person that you haven't built that comfortability with yet. Maybe sexting could be a great way to just sort of dip your toe in and give it a try and experiment and see like how it's received in a slightly less confronting way for people.
Definitely. It's a really, really safe place to test it out.
Although I suppose then there's the added element of, oh, okay, like now it's sort of, there's a paper trail and it's in writing and they could screenshot this, or so I guess there has to be some element of trust or just comfortability with like, if somebody else sees this, I'm fine with it, you know?
Definitely, yeah. With sexting, with nudes, like you really do want to have a strong sense of trust with this person. You can do like disappearing messages and stuff like that if you're really concerned, but I would typically say only ever do that with someone that you know is like pretty trustworthy.
Yeah, for sure. I love the trust talk stuff because, and I suppose like, I guess I wouldn't, you know, with the praise and the trust talk, I've always loved that and engaged in that, but didn't think of it as like dirty talk. I suppose it's just like different forms of bedroom communication.
Exactly.
And yeah, I think like when I hear dirty talk, I'm immediately like if, you know, I'm talking to someone, you know, we're potentially going to have sex and we're talking about the things we like and we don't like and stuff. And if they're like, yeah, I'm really into dirty talk, I'm like, oh no. But then I suppose like you just never know what someone's style of that's going to be. And that doesn't mean that they're not also going to be totally open to like doing some praise talk and that's definitely always been my style, like love words of affirmation, love praise and like encouragement and stuff. And like when I'm in long-term relationships, it's just like full, the trust talk is what gets me going, like that safety, that security, that emotional holding is like absolutely everything. But for me, like if someone sort of says something that even remotely feels like it could have come out of a porno, it takes me out of the moment. I'm like, oh, okay. Like if it makes me feel objectified and like like they're sort of just saying generic stuff that could be said to anyone, and it sounds like it's come out of a movie. Or so for me personally, like that's really, like, I know that that's really not my thing, and it really pulls me out of the moment and makes me feel weird. So do you feel like, even with not just degradation, but even with other kinds of dirty talk, like there should be some consent or a conversation that happens beforehand before someone is like, actually inside you and then whips out, like, oh my God, like your pussy feels so tight and wet. Like, like do we need to be maybe like gauging if people are going to be receptive to that or not beforehand? Or do you think there's just a certain level of like, kind of try it and see and practice? Hey, baby babes. Sorry to interrupt. I just had to pop my head into the lounge here and mention another virtual lounge that I'd love you to get around. It's the Labia Lounge Facebook group that I've created for listeners of the potty to mingle in. There you'll find extra bits and bobs like freebies, behind the scenes, or discounts for offerings from guests who have been interviewed on the podcast. There'll also be, hopefully, inspiring, thought-provoking conversations and support from a community of labial legends like yourself. My vision for this is that it becomes a really supportive, educational, and hilarious resource for you to have more access to me and a safe space to ask questions you can't ask anywhere else. So head over to the links in the show notes or look up the Labia Lounge group in Facebook, and I'll see you in there. And now, back to the episode.
Yeah, I mean, you can definitely have a conversation and kind of talk through the different types and just have it be like a little fun date activity to like, oh, I wonder like what your style is. And I am a big advocate for like speaking up, like either in the moment or after. If you're like, hey, just like that was so hot, loved having sex with you. There was the one moment where you said this and it's just not quite my vibe. But I really liked XYZ, right? So you can kind of talk after sex about like the grow and the glow, like these are the moments where you glowed and it was amazing. And these are some moments where we can kind of like, we can grow from that. We can learn a little bit more. And so I do think talking about sex before, during, and after sex, keeping that conversation going is always going to be helpful. And, also don't take too much offense when someone says, I didn't really like that, because we're all so different. And, the popular phrase of don't yuck someone else's yum, it's like, everyone's different and different things will turn different people on, and there's no right way or wrong way. And there's nothing wrong with them if that turns them on and doesn't turn you on, or vice versa. It's just different. And we need to, as like responsible sexual partners, we need to respect each other's yums, and we need to really kind of try to understand what it is that turns them on and off, and kind of be a little bit of a detective, because just because something works for you or has worked for a previous partner doesn't mean it will work for the next person in front of you. So just get curious and go, oh, like I wonder what happens when I press this button. Oh, okay, cool, great. I'm going to put that in the yes column, or I'll file that in the no, and next time it'll be even better.
Totally. Yeah, so like what would you do if one, say you started dating someone, you're really compatible in lots of areas and you want to be together, blah, 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 and one partner really loves a certain kind of dirty talk and the other hates it. Like, do we just try to find some common ground? Is it like more of a spectrum of like, okay, so that's a definite hard no for me, like don't say that to me, please, but this other thing, I know it really turns you on and you enjoy that. It doesn't really turn me on, but it's like I can get around it and I can do that for you, or and then there's other things that you can both overlap on. Like, is it just kind of a continuous iteration of trying to find a way to kind of align, or what do you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. I think there's the open conversation about how you can compromise. I would say if there's something that someone's like, oh, I can't possibly get off without calling you a dirty little slut, then it's like, well, okay, maybe we should unpack that. Because it has to be something that everyone's comfortable with. And like, I don't ever want to say or do something during sex that turns me on so much, but my partner is really disliking. Like, part of sex and the pleasure of sex is the mutual, reciprocal, circular sort of nature of pleasure. Like, I want to, I'm going to be turned on by them being turned on by me being turned on by them being, it's this constant thing. And so if there's any moment where they're like, oh, like, pussy dry, or like, oh, I'm not into that, then it's not going to turn me on even more. And I should say, like, pussy dry is just like a fun colloquial thing. We all know about arousal non-concordance. That's another topic. But, totally. Just like, sometimes you're like, oh, that thing just made me go, nope, no thank you, closed up.
I like talk about it like, because it's classic like sex nerd stuff. Like, I can't really get away with saying like, fuck, nothing makes my pussy drier without like the sex educator voice coming in and being like, hey now, but what about arousal non-concordance? That's not really correct. You can't really, you can't really say that. So like, I think
what
of
happened
that.
In my head then for you. You read me
exactly.
Like, wait a second.
Exactly. I know. Well, even when you said it, I was like, oh,
I know.
I wonder if she's also thinking that. So and for anyone that isn't aware, I've definitely talked about this in episodes and I teach about it a lot, but if you're not aware, vaginal lubrication is not a reliable indication of actual subjective arousal. You can have a dry pussy but still be DTF. You can have a wet pussy but actually not be ready for penetration. It doesn't always line up with how, your body's like arousal signals such as lubrication doesn't always line up with your brain's actual level of turn on. So when we say like, oh my God, my pussy's so, like, your pussy being dry doesn't mean shit necessarily.
Exactly.
So anyway, that's the caveat. What I now say,
legs shut, panties on.
Totally. I think of like, I don't know if you remember, maybe it's like in a Simpsons episode or something, but like one of these cartoon characters like sucks on something sour, maybe a lemon, and his mouth kind of like goes inwards, like it looks like a butthole, and then his whole face ends up squeezing inwards, and it's really hard to describe like without the visual, but I just like talk about how it makes my pussy just clam up so much it basically inverts on itself again, and my whole body turns inside out because my pussy's just run away up in there and it's just fully like flip. Do you know what I mean?
Shop is shut and you shall not pass. Covered.
I wish there was. Oh, but it's so fun to say like, to just use wet pussy, dry pussy. It's so fun.
I know. Like, and that's the thing. Like, when I speak like with friends and stuff about, like with all the caveats and blah, 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 just certain behaviors. It's like, okay, cool. If they do that, pussy dry. Like, oh, if my partner did that, like cock soft. Like, no, that's a turn. It's just, we're just saying it's a turn off. But the sex educator in me is like, oh, actually.
I know. So, we're perpetuating a misconception.
I know.
Panties on.
How dare we?
Panties on. Yeah. What else could I feel like? Yeah, I talk a bit about like, lady boner. That could be a thing, but
lady boner's a thing. It's
like it still comes into the
it's just like like shut. Yeah. See you bye.
All right, cool, great. Good little tangent. Cool. Well, do you want to do the segment TMI and then we can chat about some tips for taking some hot nudes, and maybe like some more stuff on sexting. So with the TMI segment, I just ask my guests for a TMI story. If something springs to mind, maybe it's related to like what we've been talking about. Maybe it's something totally out of pocket. But basically, give me your worst. Lay it on me.
TMI, we love it. TMI, we love it.
So when I was a kid, and I'm sure we've all been through the phase where we were just like humping anything we could. We found our clit and we're like, woo, let's hump the teddy, let's hump the couch, let's hump everything.
Birds
So I was in that phase when I was a child at one point, and I remember there was in our bathroom we had like a washing machine, and there was a little moment where I'd like put a towel over the corner of the washing machine. It wasn't even on, but I just like have a little grind. And my mum walked in one day when I was having a little grind, and I was like, oh, and I quickly was like, I was reaching down the bottom because I dropped a few coins, and I was trying to get some coins from behind the washing machine. That's why I'm bent. Oh my God. And she's just like, whoop, closes the door. And I remember I was just mortified for ages. I was like trying to like come up with stories as to why that was happening. And it was like, clearly she knows that I was just having a little grind on the corner of the washing machine because I found my clit. But I was absolutely mortified for a
Oh my
long
God,
time.
I would have died.
Yeah. Super
Did you just
embarrassing.
like experiment with different surfaces? Like if the washing machine wasn't even on, like what was so good about that corner? Were you just trying different
I think
shit?
it was a private corner, you know,
Right.
because I was like, you know, I had a shower, and then I thought, I obviously hadn't locked the door, but I thought like, oh, I'm in here privately, so I'll just get a towel, a little bit of padding, you know, put the towel over the corner and have a grind, because the couches were out in public view and I could only do that when everyone was gone. I had to go into my room with my teddy, you know. Oh my gosh, it's so funny. Like, and I know that, and I think this is such a common experience, you know, like the teddies and grinding certain things, but also like experimenting with friends when you're just like a kid playing house and you just like kind of like rub up against each other in bed and be like, oh yes, we're playing mummies and daddies.
Excuse this quick interruption. I'm shamelessly seeking reviews and 5-star ratings for the potty because, as I'm sure you've noticed by now, it's pretty fab, and the more people who get to hear it, the more people I can help with it. Reviews and ratings actually do make a big difference to this little independent podcaster, and it's really easy to just quickly show your support by taking that simple act of either leaving 5 stars for the show on Spotify, or even better, writing a written review and leaving 5 stars over on Apple Podcasts. Or if you're a real overachiever, you can do them both. That would be mad. If you're writing a review, though, just be sure to use G-rated words, because despite the fact that this is a podcast about sexuality, words like sex can be censored and your review won't make it through the gates. Lame. Anyway, I would personally recommend doing that right now while you remember, just to get on top of it and let me know you're with me on this journey. Thanks, gang. Enjoy the rest of the epi. Yeah, it's such a it is such a common thing, and like I still will get clients coming in and just talking about how ashamed they are and that they did this thing and they can't believe, like, they don't realize how common it is. I think they were the only ones that did that as kids, and they think that they're like perverted or something, and they're like, yeah, I was a really early bloomer, it's so gross, I'm so like embarrassed. And I'm like, oh my God, babe, people are fiddling with their willies in the womb, and like, you know,
Seriously.
toddlers are like grinding up on things and humping things, and like it's so common. But super weirdly, at least to my knowledge, like unless I've just forgotten, I didn't do any of that stuff as a kid or a teenager. It was crazy. I think I just like, I don't know how to explain it when I was a child, and maybe I did and I just don't remember, but I didn't discover my clit and I didn't discover sexual pleasure at all until I was in my teens and I had a boyfriend and I was like dry humping him. I think that's how I had my first orgasm. And I was just so riddled with so much sexual shame and body shame and self-loathing and stuff around all of that I didn't touch myself until I was like in my 20s, and I went to like a sexpo and was like, whoa, and sort of just like, you know, started experimenting. And, you know, I've told this story on the podcast before, but the first time I kind of self-pleasured, I wrapped my fingers in Glad wrap because like I didn't want to touch myself directly, and there was still so much like revulsion and shame. And it's so crazy because like I know like from research and from hundreds, thousands of conversations with people, it's very, very common to find your clit quite early and self-pleasure as a child, and then you know, the teddy, all of this. It's like such a common trope because it's a thing that happens. And I'm like, why didn't I do that? That's so weird. Like I just never explored. And then when I was like old enough to like know that that was a thing that people did, I was so repulsed at the idea, and I like never even bothered trying until I was like, you know, in my 20s. So it's kind of crazy. Yeah.
Definitely. I mean, I think the thing is like with not finding it early as well, it's not something that like everyone has that experience of finding their clit, because you might just have never touched it or moved in a certain way where you're like, oh, wait a second, what is that? And been curious enough to explore it, you know, without being kind of told, hey, you have this place in between your legs that can feel really good. Because like, can you imagine if someone's like, tomorrow they're like, oh, by the way, did you know that there's this spot, you know, on the top of your earlobe, and if you press that, you know, 3 times and then like pull, then suddenly you feel pleasure. You're like, wait, I had no idea. And so, you know, it could just be something like that where you just didn't have the experience of like coming across it until later when you're like, oh, wait, oh, apparently there's this place that feels really good. And then you know, went off and explored it with someone else, you know?
Yeah, true. I feel a bit ripped off though, to be honest. Like I never had that phase of like fooling around with my friends or discovering like, I think it's so great to like find ways to experience pleasure in your body so young and have an experience of like that sexual pleasure that is so innocent and so beautiful and pure. And like, you know, by the time I discovered sexual pleasure, I already had so many layers of like conditioning and negative beliefs and like shitty sexual narratives and scripts and things that were like coloring my experience of it. So there was already so much shame in place that I probably never had an experience of enjoying it with like just total like innocence and joy, you know?
Totally.
Until I worked through all the stuff like later in life. So anyway, that was a double TMI. So let's talk about taking nudes. Another thing that I've never done. It's so funny because I'm like a sex coach and educator and this is my jam. But like there's just certain things that like have never appealed to me or that I've never done. And I'd love to chat about like what's the appeal? How do you take a really – also I'm shit at taking photos and selfies. And it's an art form. So, let's talk about that.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of taking nudes. I think it's just such a fun way to celebrate your own sexuality. And a lot of the time, you know, they don't have to see the light of day. You know, it's not about – again, it's not about the performance. It's not about another person witnessing it. And I think a lot of people kind of can't wrap their heads around that because they're like, well, why would I take it if I'm not going to show anyone? If I'm not sending it to someone for the intention of turning them on. And I'm like, well, we come back to ourselves and we go, I want to turn myself on, or I want to celebrate myself, or right now I feel really hot. And like, you know, I actually think like the rise of selfies is great because it's like, oh yeah, cool. I feel great. I feel beautiful. I feel artistic. I feel expressive. I want to just capture that. And I think that's a really beautiful thing to be able to do and to kind of gift yourself. And you know, just because no one else is seeing it doesn't necessarily matter. You can just have it for yourself and just be like, cool, that was a fun exercise. I also, last year, I created briefly a whole group for people to share their sensual selfies. If they didn't have a partner to send them to, or they just wanted to share. And it was all about the art of self-portraiture and self-expression. And so it was like a Telegram group and people would just share their like sensual nudes. And it was always, you know, kind of like relatively artistic, nothing sexually explicit. So there were no genitals, but it was like nudity. And people would just be like, wow, this is amazing. Oh, beautiful lighting, like incredible silhouette. That's so gorgeous. And it's just this nice way to celebrate your form. And, you know, there's certain things that will help. You know, using certain props or, getting the right lighting, natural lighting, and finding the posing that works for you. It can be a really fun process. I typically say to start with, just like film yourself, like holding some poses, moving, and trying to find what shape brings out like the best sort of silhouette, or like whatever it is that you're going for, the most interesting kind of movement, and then go from there and start to snap away.
Yeah, amazing. I love the group for like people to share it with other women, I imagine. And I've got a couple of friends that'll like send them to me. Like it's just something that we do. Like it's very, I don't know, it's like more of a sisterhood thing, and that's lovely. And I've done like nude photo shoots with photographers and stuff for like their art projects or whatever, but I've never like taken a nude and sent it to someone, like I've never kind of done that, which is so funny because it's such a big thing nowadays, and there's so much talk about like, the safety and and everything like that. But that's such a helpful tip, like sort of filming yourself first, because like I really struggle with like setting up a tripod or like, trying to take photos. Like it's never been my kind of medium, like photography. But it's definitely an art, and I think that's such a practical thing that people can like get started with, and the whole, it doesn't have to be for someone else. Like it's again, same with like what we were talking about in part 1 with the embodied sensual movement and dance. Like it can be just for you. It can be a way to connect with your sexuality and sensuality. It can be a way to feel more confident and more embodied, and boost your self-esteem and just explore your creativity. So I think if you look at it through that lens, it can be such a beautiful and explorative way to connect with yourself. And then being able to share that in a safe way with like other women or a friend or like, another photographer or artist. Like it doesn't have to be like I'm sending a sexy pic to a boy, which that can also be great and fun.
Yeah, super fun. But I think sometimes we have this assumption that the point of a nude is to turn someone on. And so often, people will be like, oh, okay, so what should I do? I'm going to take a nude, so I'm going to like squeeze my tits together and I'm going to do this, or I'm going to do a little pouty face or something like explicitly erotic. And so my invitation is always like, see yourself as art, be your own muse, and try to create art with your body. And so I actually think personally, I think the most beautiful nudes are the ones that are more implied. It's not about like spreading your legs or like, holding your cock and being like, check it out. It's like, it's about like the tease, like the evocation of it, like evoke a response in me. Don't just kind of go straight for the goods. Like I want to sort of be teased. And I also just want to witness like this beautiful form. And so I think it's more about like the shapes and the insinuation and
the suggestion,
rather than being like, okay, here's some tits straight away. It's not as exciting. Like, I love titties. Love some titties. Amazing.
Love titties.
But let's like just be a bit more creative with it. And this group that I created, it's not running anymore. But it was a really, really fun thing. To just explore like the art of self-portraiture as well. So it's a bit fun.
Beautiful. I love it. All right. Well, I'm conscious of time and we have just done a big old double epi, so I will let you go. But thank you so much for all of your knowledge and your stories and your humor. It's been such a pleasure chatting, and I'll put all of your links in the show notes and the Facebook group. Would love to stay in touch.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. I'll give you some codes as well to put in the show notes for the Art of Seduction, and send nudes as well if you like.
Yeah, great. Awesome. Sounds good.
Hey, me again. If you'd like to support the potty and you've already given it 5 stars on whatever platform you're listening on, I want to mention that you can buy some really dope merch from the website and get yourself a Labia Lounge tote, tee, togs. Yep, you heard that right. I even have Labia Lounge bathers. Or a cute fanny pack if that'd blow your hair back. So if fashion isn't your passion, though, you can donate to my Buy Me a Coffee donation page, which is actually called Buy Me a Soy Chai Latte, because I'll be the first to admit I'm a bit of a Melbourne cafe tosser like that. And yes, that is my coffee order. You can do a once-off donation or an ongoing membership and sponsor me for as little as 3 fat ones a month. And I also offer one-on-one coaching and online courses that'll help you level up your sex life and relationship with yourself and others in a really big way. So every bit helps, because it ain't cheap to put out a sweet podcast into the world every week out of my own pocket. So I will be undyingly grateful if you support me and my biz financially in any of these ways. And if you like, I'll even give you a mental BJ with my mind from the lounge itself. Saucy. I'll pop the links in the show notes. Thank you. Later.
And that's it, darling hearts. Thanks for stopping by the Labia Lounge. Your bum groove in the couch will be right where you left it, just waiting for you to sink back in for some more double L action next time. If you'd be a dear and subscribe, share this episode, or leave a review on iTunes, then you can pat yourself on the snatch, because that's a downright act of sex-positive feminist activism, and you'd be supporting my vision to educate, empower, demystify and destigmatize with this here podcast. I'm also always open to feedback, topic ideas that you'd love to hear covered, questions or guest suggestions, so feel free to get in touch via my website or over on Insta. You can also send me in TMI stories to be shared anonymously on the pod. My handle is FreyaGraf_the Labia Lounge, if my account hasn't been deleted for being too sex positive, which, is always a possibility with censorship. But just in case the chronic censorship finally does obliterate my social channels, I'd highly recommend going and joining my mailing list and snagging yourself some fun freebies for the trouble at www.freyagraf.com/freebies. Anyway, later, labial legends. See you next time.